I started to realize that I wasn't in a partnership. I was in a dynamic where my role was just to stabilize everything. Like, as long as I don't have needs, as long as I don't bring up how I'm feeling, then we can keep the peace and things can go on peacefully. I felt like he just needed me to be his emotional caretaker in a way that was never really reciprocated. The relationship really looked perfect from the outside, but on the inside, I felt so alone. I remember the moment I realized that if I just had a roommate instead of a boyfriend, my life would be so much easier. At least with a roommate, we would split the household chores 50-50, and if one person cooked dinner, for example, the other person would do the dishes, or vice versa. We would trade off who does the cooking. I would at least have my own room that I could go in. I wouldn't have to share a bed with someone and share every single area of the house. I would at least have some space that was my own, but it felt like in this relationship he was just constantly encroaching on my space to the point where I had nowhere that I could go, that I could just be alone. Have you ever been in a relationship where you slowly realized that you were carrying all of the emotional weight? Please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your story. I felt like I had to emotionally provide for him, be his therapist. I also had to be his personal chef and his maid. I was doing all of the household labor, all of the emotional labor, and a lot of the financial heavy lifting too, as a matter of fact. Whereas with a roommate, I would at least be responsible for my own food and not paying for somebody else's food. So after we broke up, I actually have done so much better financially because I can now meal prep, I can save food for later, I can have it for later, and I'm not financially responsible for paying for an overgrown man-child who cannot financially support himself. Like with a roommate, we could at least split the chores evenly, we could each have our own space. There's less emotional tension there. I'm not constantly having to manage somebody else's emotions. It would just be so much more peaceful in a home where I just have a roommate. And I started noticing that unequal contribution. Like, I was contributing way more emotionally to the relationship than he was. Like, he was always safe to bring up how something made him feel. I was always available to listen and to validate his perspective, but he wasn't doing that for me. If I ever brought up how I felt, like even if it wasn't about him, if it was just, hey, I had a really hard day at work today, I got yelled at by a customer, he would somehow turn that into my fault. Like, he would start critiquing my performance and saying, oh, well, you should have done this or you should have done that. And it's really exhausting to feel like I can't come home and talk to my partner about things. So I just started kind of bottling it up and not sharing with him because I didn't want to feel like I was just being dismissed. Like, it didn't matter. Like, as long as I don't have needs, as long as I don't bring up how I'm feeling, then we can keep the peace and things can go on peacefully. But as soon as I brought up something, like anything, no matter how small it was, it would just turn into an argument. And so I would just start minimizing my needs. I would start walking on eggshells. If I wanted to bring up something like making a budget was a big one. I just wanted to start planning financially for our future. I wanted to get married and, start saving money so that we could buy a house and start a family. And even these things would turn into a huge fight, no matter how delicately I would bring it up. I had to just constantly manage somebody else's emotions, and it was so exhausting. I was at the point where I just really wanted to be alone. Being alone just seemed so much more peaceful than being in a relationship. If being alone sounds more peaceful than being in your relationship, that's your body trying to tell you something, that this is not your person. I hope this helps.